Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really cool review for you guys from the brand Baltany, founded back in 2010. Their mission is simple: redesign classic, iconic timepieces using the latest watchmaking technology. Their goal is to create the most historically accurate homages ever, while still maintaining the spirit of the original iconic timepieces, along with, of course, their own modern interpretations. Now, in terms of type of watch, this is a pilot's watch. Some key characteristics and design language you're looking for a pilot. Of course, you're going to want to find that balance of legibility and functionality. This is their S2076 Khaki Aviation homage, and it is a white dial, black bezel variation of that. And it's an homage to the $995 Hamilton Khaki Aviation Pilot Pioneer 38 millimeter. It goes for $165 direct. And yeah, I mean, it's another homage watch, but I will say they put their twist on it. And even this particular design language actually isn't super tied to Hamilton historically. This is actually more of a Hanhart design in terms of that era. But of course, hey, Hamilton's the latest group to release something along these lines, and Baltany, being Baltany, released their own kind of 3 different variations of that. For me, this one was the most interesting, but there are some other variations. With all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, so pretty clean and simple layout here. Very nice. I mean, I dig the cathedral hands, the full numerals, the train track. I mean, it all just flows together really nicely, taking elements that typically would be more associated with something like a diver's watch, because you do have that rotating bezel. Now, in terms of the dimensions here, it's actually 37.5 millimeters for the case, but about 38 millimeters at the bezel. So if you are somebody who does enjoy a smaller wearing watch, I think this could really be something special for you. Now, in terms of the thickness, 12.5 millimeters, which isn't super thin by any means, but I wouldn't call it overly thick, especially when you consider the fact that it does have a rotating bezel, and the movement inside is a Seiko movement, which is going to be on the thicker side. Okay, so lug to lug, 43 millimeters. That is a magic number, lug to lug wise. So if you have a smaller wrist, I don't. But I totally understand the plight of those of you with smaller wrists, because my comment section is littered with complaints for people who just want smaller sitting watches, right? Let's just sit smaller on the wrist, and lug to lug is going to be a big kind of play within that. Now, this is stainless steel, all brushed, so, you know, very much leaning on that tool aesthetic. And I do like the fact that they used a lot of matted finishes here, and it all just kind of comes together quite nicely overall as a theme. Also, the crystal here, check that out. Very nice. It actually is a double dome. It's a very slight dome. So it doesn't protrude too much from the case, but you can tell it's a double dome because you're not getting a bunch of distortion. It's actually still very, very legible, even at quite harsh angles, as you guys can see here. So very cool from that perspective. Getting into the bezel here. It is a friction fit bezel, and it does have a nice bit of resistance to it, so there's no clickiness. But the nice thing is, because there's no clicks, there's nothing to really worry about aligning, because you're always going to be able to set it to, you know, the most minute adjustment there. So very cool. And it does have a loomed ceramic insert. Yeah, guys, loomed ceramic insert at under $200. That is pretty awesome. And it's a matted ceramic, right? So it's even Polished ceramic is easy, right? Nice and glossy, but going through and making it matte, I mean, it's pretty impressive that Baltany is able to kind of just do that. And I think that's one of the impressive things about this brand. Although, yeah, they're an homage brand and they're not doing too much of, their own design. They're just tweaking existing designs. The nice thing is they do make an effort to really add value in terms of the execution, right? In terms of the fit, the finish. Now, it's not luxury level by any means, but it is just really well put together. I mean, this is a simple satin brush, but it is really just well done. The tactile engagement on the grip here, whether it be the crown or the bezel, it all feels very nice to the touch. Now, it is a screw down crown. Again, a nice feature. You don't always get that in a Hamilton, rarely actually. And then you do have this nice kind of sterile, brushed case back, which is nice because, yeah, it doesn't add any additional thickness. Like if they would have tried to add a display window or something like that, right? And what's inside is, not super display worthy. It's just a Seiko Instruments NH38, so a no date movement, which means there's going to be no ghost date position in terms of the crown, which is nice. And me personally, I've had kind of mixed bag type of experiences with the NH38 specifically because I've found on certain models, not this one or really any Baltany, so they take their QC pretty seriously, is that it's not mushy at all, the action. So when you hack the seconds hand, I'm super unconfident with this movement when it comes to hacking the seconds hand because there's been so many times I'll hack the seconds hand, then I'll push it back in and it doesn't disengage. Here it does. So I do appreciate that. Nice tactile click. You can feel the release. It's just one of those little things, I can't fault the other models that I've handled that had issues like that, because you don't know if it's like every single one. It's probably just your unit, right? But I will say really good experience with Baltany and the NH38. So very good. I'm glad that they, passed that little red flag test, because normally I just prefer an NH35 or NH36, even with a ghost date position, because of that mushy hacking feature that I just haven't been a fan of in the past. Now, the movement itself, though, 41-hour power reserve, beats at 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate, which is quite nice. You do have this nice matte cream dial with, printed indexing there. And you can see there's even a bit of a slight texturing there, which looks very good. Polished cathedral handset, nicely loomed. You're getting Swiss Superluminova, old radium, I believe, and it just comes together. It works. This color palette in particular, because I'm, a little bit more on the tan side, isn't always my bag. Like, I'm not necessarily looking for this particular lighter shade in terms of the strap here, but I think it all comes together stylistically very nicely. And for not everybody's my same skin tone, so this is going to look great on folks that are darker and lighter. I think I might just be a little bit too close to the strap tone, so it might be a little too tone on tone for me, but I do enjoy the color play. I like the use of creams, that old radium, and it's not old radium just for the sake of old radium. I like that it actually flows with the color palette, right? This isn't a stark white dial. This is a creamy white dial, and because of that, the warmer tones, it all flows. Also, even the black, you could say, is more I should say less saturated with that matte feature, right? So it has more of kind of an anthracite gray kind of flavor to it depending on the lighting. So yeah, I dig that a whole lot. 100 meters of water resistance, guys, and that's a confidence inspiring 100 meters thanks to this screw down crown, which is fantastic. You got 20 millimeter lug, so this is going to fit on just, really anything you want to put it on. 20 millimeters is like the most popular lug size, but I will say right out of the box, the strap on here is surprisingly good, surprisingly supple, well put together. I mean, not luxury level or anything like that, but hey, you do have the nice little stitch accents there. You do have another reinforcement. Look at this pin buckle, fully milled. Even the finger section here, nicely signed. I mean, this thing's overbuilt. Look at the finish on the side of that buckle. I mean, this thing is nice. And again, it's just impressive, for the things that you kind of will trade off in terms of design and originality. You do get a good amount of kind of value and bang per buck back in just the level of execution and, being executed at a high level. Like, it's supple, nicely finished, nice and clean. Look at that. That's just well done. You even got the stitching accent there. It all comes together really, really nicely. And this tapers down from about 20 millimeters down to about 17 and a half. And then you got about an 18 millimeter on the inlet side of this buckle. And then at the widest point, it's actually about 22 millimeters. So you do have a nice beefy buckle, but I feel like it flows actually pretty well. Even though this is a more petite setup here, it just gives you that feeling of a tool kind of vibe, right? Where it feels very function forward, which I can appreciate. But with all that said, let's go ahead, get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you guys can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears really, really nicely. And I was a little worried, 38 millimeters with a bezel typically can wear a little bit small on my wrist. And again, just on my wrist, this has more of a mid-sized vibe to it because you do have that turning bezel. The nice thing about the smaller sizes is, of course, if I get my wrist too close to the lens, typically you're going to get a good amount of perspective distortion. It's going to make the watch look much bigger. It does make it look bigger, but not oversized because its starting point is actually still quite small. The nice thing is you're getting a nice amount of balance of that dial. Now, although you're getting full Arabic numerals and you're getting that outer, railroad track there, it all still feels very balanced and it doesn't feel overly crowded, especially when you consider how thin that turning bezel actually is on that insert. So yeah, I think it actually wears really well. What I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here just so you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio in terms of how this may lay on your own wrist. And you guys can see it is a really clean size, perfect for, if you're living in a colder area, you're throwing a flannel on. I mean, I would love to see this peeking out from underneath a nice clean flannel. It just has that very nice vibe to it where it is quite, I think it's quite versatile. Like, this could go with so many different, styles of clothing and wear, especially if you are into kind of that vintage aesthetic, something that's a little bit more worn in. I think this would fit beautifully. And the nice thing is you're not paying too much. So if you're not huge into watches or watch collecting, the nice thing is you can have a nice, really nice looking watch, for not a whole lot of money. Or if you just keep spending your money on other things that you're going to wear more often, but hey, maybe this is going to be, that fall watch for you when it is, long sleeve season, you don't have to spend too much. You can just, you have something, you just toy with it. And I think you could really get a kick out of this piece. So I dig that. And look at that. It lays nicely, hugs the wrist really well with those nicely turned down lugs that are actually very, very short. You can see the strap drapes nicely finished in terms of the edges and everything like that. And it's just clean. I dig that. It's not a bunch of billboarding. It's very clean, just Baltany. It's letting you know it's an automatic. It's letting you know it's water resistant. And, I could probably do without the water resistance there, but I'd say fair play. Because it is a very important spec in terms of a selling point for those of you who are going to wear this like a tool watch, right? It's going to be something that has to be ready for that kind of everyday adventure, even though it does have a certain level of refinement that I can really appreciate. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Ooh. Check it out. You're getting a nice amount of loom for a pilot's watch. So that's nice. This isn't a diver. It really doesn't have any need to be quite this bright, this potent. I like that they even went ahead and loomed that bezel insert. I just dig that. It's just a brand trying to give you a little extra when, not every brand's out there trying to do that. At least not at a face value, right? A lot of times you can, you do some digging and you can find that little extra value. But, one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. And you guys can see here, what you're going to probably lose out on is in the kind of middle range here. The contrast against the dial and the black text is, it's not going to be the best. But when you are in, true darker situations, I'm going to give it a little extra punch here. You can see you do have those extra indices there, kind of outside, of course, of those center markers. And of course, the camera's having just a tough time keeping focus on here, just because I do want to have the aperture wide open, which means this, in terms of the depth of field, it's going to be very, very narrow. So trying to get everything kind of in focus at an angle is tough. But man, this thing looks good. It's clean. It still looks like itself under various lighting conditions. It's not going to have some crazy dynamic texturing or anything like that that's really going to make it pop or jump out at you. But I will say, it looks good. It just renders clean and nice regardless. So I dig that. Let's get everything back going again. Here we go. And there we are. Okay. Closing thoughts for me, guys, on this one. I will say that on the wrist, you're getting that classic mid-size proportions. You're getting something that is really super just clean and casual. I like that. I like that even though it does have some dressy elements, it does stay very, very casual. And that's something that isn't necessarily easy to find at all times. So I appreciate that. That's kind of what makes it stand out for me. In terms of model variants, it's also available with a black dial, black bezel combination, which is going to be a little bit truer, of course, to that original Hamilton model that this does kind of render like. And then there's also a black dial with a white bezel insert, which is, I think, very interesting. But for me, this cream dial, black bezel combination as seen is the one that really spoke to me. I just think it just comes together really, really nicely. It looks very handsome. Now, in terms of comparable models, it does compare very well against the $995 Hamilton Khaki Aviation Pilot Pioneer 38. Sure, you lose out on, the extra power reserve you're going to get with those Powermatic 80 movements within the Swatch group, but you do gain the additional security of a screw-down crown, plus a movement that can easily be regulated by your local watchmaker or even yourself if you're pretty handy with some really small screwdrivers. Now, you're also going to get a, clearly more preferable 20 millimeter lug width versus the Hamilton's 18 millimeter. Now, if you have a smaller wrist, you probably are okay with the 18 millimeter. But for me, as somebody with a larger wrist who enjoys smaller watches, that 20 millimeter lug width is what absolutely makes this so much more wearable and makes me way more comfortable wearing it. Because I'm not just looking at it in a wristy, or as a floating wrist. I'm looking at it, with the full human form being taken into consideration in terms of proportions. So, yeah, the 20 millimeters, something about it. And, let me know in the comments how you guys feel about that. But for me, that's kind of the magic dimension, and when it comes to watches, probably a little bit smaller than 38 millimeters, which this is slightly smaller, at least case width wise, at 37.5, and then you got the 38 millimeter bezel, so you're getting kind of the best of both worlds in terms of fit, and then also the physical and optical presence on the wrist. Now, for me, guys, bottom line, this particular aesthetic is actually more akin to vintage Hanharts, right? So even Hamilton borrowed much of this design's elements. I'm not saying that they didn't use cathedral hands in the past, or they didn't use this type of dial or bezel or whatever. I'm just saying that in terms of, for that time period within the aviation space, Hanhart really made this aesthetic theirs, right? In the same way that Hamilton made, the standard field watch aesthetic their own, right? So, or, any one of the 5 Flieger manufacturers, the A dial, it's very distinctive and very much tied to particular brands, right? For this particular, modern reinterpretation, Hamilton going back doesn't necessarily have that same gravitas or ownership over this, semi-generic design as much as somebody like Hanhart, which I'm also a big fan of. So again, so that for me, that makes it adds a little bit more complexity, right? In terms of, oh, this is just a simple homage. Well, the watch that it's homaging is also homaging to a certain extent as well, right? So it does make you feel a little bit better about Baltany taking similar inspirations, but that's just me. I'm just kind of a watch collector that's always looking for kind of excuses as to why certain things are the way they are and what's okay versus what's not okay. We all kind of make those justifications in our head. But with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. Big shout out to Baltany for sending this piece in. They're always very kind. If I see something that interests me, I'll reach out. They typically oblige, or they'll hit me up periodically and say, hey, we have this new release. What do you think? And if I think it looks interesting, I'll bring it on and share it with you guys. So in this case, I did find this quite interesting. But let me know what you guys all think down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please would like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.